That search occurred the last day of Tylee Ryan's sighting, and we believe she was burned and buried on his property the following day.
Chad Daybell and Lori Vallow shocked the world in 2019 after killing their exes and children and fleeing to get married and spend their honeymoon in Hawaii. Now, Chad Daybell's trial shocked again. New videos and police reports paint a really grim picture. This Doomsday couple is simply the worst. They left 4 people dead and took no responsibility for it.
We ruled her cause of death to be asphyxia.
What did you determine her manner of death to be?
We determined her manner of death to be homicide. We also didn't find any natural disease that would explain her death. Her heart was completely normal.
Meanwhile, they acted high and mighty, claiming they spoke to God and could tell who was a good soul and who was an evil one. Except they didn't look in the mirror. Did karma finally catch up with them? What is the super recent verdict of Chad's June 2024 trial? This is the sickening story of Chad Daybell and Lori Vallow. On January 31st, 2017, Charles Vallow returned to an empty home. He had been away with business for a week in another state, and he was supposed to reunite with his family in Arizona that day, except nobody was home. He was a little worried. For the last 2 days, he hadn't gotten through to his wife, Lori, or his adopted children, Tylee or JJ. Upon reaching the airport that night, Charles headed to the parking lot to retrieve his truck, only to find it nowhere in sight. Left with no other choice, he hailed a taxi to take him home. As he arrived at his doorstep, he realized that the locks had been replaced and his belongings were scattered in the garbage. To make matters worse, when he checked his bank account, he discovered that $35,000 had vanished without a trace. Overwhelmed by the series of unfortunate events, Charles reached out to the authorities that very night to report his predicament.
So what's going on tonight?
I don't know how else to say it. We're LDS. She thinks she's a resurrected being and a god, and remember the 144,000. Jesus is coming next year. She took all the money out of her bank account today. My truck had gone from the airport. She went to the airport and got it. I just flew in from Houston, from Dallas.
When they entered the garage, they noticed all the family cars had disappeared, along with several valuables. Charles told the detectives something else, that Lori had threatened to unalive him shortly before this incident.
She said, "You're not Charles. I don't know who you are, what you did with Charles, but I can murder you now."
You might think of all of these clues clumped together. They might give authorities a good reason to start looking for Lori. But that night, the 2 officers on the scene only told Charles off for wasting their time. They left without filing any sort of report. Charles, however, filed for divorce, while Lori was AWOL for 58 days. On July 11th, 2019, the emergency services received a disturbing call.
911, where is your emergency?
I'm in police and an ambulance.
What's the emergency there?
I got in a fight with my brother-in-law and I shot him in self-defense.
And is he hurt or is he alive? Or?
Yeah, but he's not moving.
How long ago did this happen?
A couple of minutes.
What's his name, your brother-in-law?
Charles Vallow.
Okay, what part of his body is injured?
In the chest.
I'm sorry, where?
In the chest.
Okay, is he awake and responsive or unconscious?
Unconscious.
Is he breathing?
I can't tell.
Okay, are you willing to go over to him and check?
Sure.
When the first responders arrived at the scene, they found Charles's brother-in-law, Alex Cox, sitting on the pavement. And inside the house was Charles Vallow's lifeless body, surrounded by a large red pool. Alex did not seem distraught. He was very matter-of-fact with the officers. He and his sister's daughter, Tylee, were waiting at the house while Lori was taking her son, JJ, to school. When he got home, Charles was visibly agitated and confrontational, Alex said. In response, Tylee quickly retrieved a baseball bat for protection. However, as she returned, Charles forcefully snatched the bat from her grasp and struck Alex on the head with a forceful blow. Reacting swiftly, Alex drew his firearm and discharged multiple rounds into Charles's chest. Surprisingly, despite the alleged bat attack, Alex appeared unscathed, with no apparent injuries to his head. Closer examination by law enforcement revealed only a minuscule mark, raising suspicions of a self-inflicted wound. As a semi-professional baseball player, Charles had the strength and skill to deliver a potentially lethal strike with a bat. However, this aggressive behavior stood in stark contrast to his known peaceful nature, as he had no prior history of engaging in physical confrontation. These were all questions the detectives would ask themselves later. For now, there was this.
How long have you lived here?
Like 3 weeks.
Oh, geez. Yeah, okay.
That's why the neighbors don't know us.
Gotcha.
Like, hi neighbor, sorry.
Lori Vallow and her daughter Tylee were chilling behind their new home. Lori's husband, dead, in the main room. And when the detectives spoke to their new neighbors in the following days, they found out that Lori threw a big pool party the day after her husband was found dead. Lori's creepy deadbeat brother Alex was kept in custody for just a few hours, while he retold his bogus self-defense story to a couple of bored officers. When this was said and done, they released him. Perhaps they shouldn't have done that. And they certainly should have kept a closer eye on Lori. On the day after Charles's death, Lori sent a snappy text to his sons from a previous marriage. Hi boys, I have very sad news. Your dad passed away yesterday. I'm working on making arrangements, and I'll keep you informed with what's going on. I'm still not sure how to handle things. Just wanted to say that I love you, and so did your dad. Just to reiterate, Lori sent them a text. A couple of days later, Lori, Tylee, and JJ moved in with Lori's new boyfriend, Chad Daybell, in Rexburg, Idaho. And Lori's brother Alex followed them there. This is the last photo of Tylee alive, hugging her brother, with Alex delivering a creepy smile in the background at Yellowstone National Park. This is happening on September 8th, 2019. After this, Tylee vanished, and 10 days later, her little brother followed. One of his neighbors saw him playing outside his new Rexburg home on September 17th. He was never seen alive after this. On September 19th, Lori went to his school and unenrolled him, claiming she had changed her mind and would homeschool him instead. 2 children had completely disappeared, and no one ever heard from them again. For the first few days, everyone was pretty relaxed, thinking the family was just getting used to their new lives in Rexburg. But as the days turned into weeks, JJ's grandparents and Tylee's dad started getting really worried. Lori wouldn't pick up their calls, but she'd shoot them texts saying the kids are okay and out and about. Here's the thing. Every single time someone tried to reach out to her, she'd come up with some excuse like JJ's hanging out with my buddy in Arizona, or Tylee's crashing at her friends' places. But the funny part, the kids were never actually with her. By the time November 2019 rolled around, the kids had been missing for 2 whole months, and it was the hottest gossip in all of Idaho.
People were interested in the story right from the beginning. We don't normally get missing kids news releases that are like this, and it just continued to get bigger and bigger.
And the main reason was Lori's blatant lack of cooperation.
Typically when a missing person is reported, it's the parents that call us. And so when we posted this story, I think people immediately knew that something was fishy.
By November, the FBI got involved and the case started making national headlines. JJ's grandparents, Larry and Kay, were very involved and concerned.
He was our baby from, just instant fall in love. That's what you do with grandkids. You just fall in love immediately.
Little JJ was born super early, weighing just a smidge over 2 pounds. On top of that, he was on the autism spectrum, which meant he needed some extra TLC in the education department. His grandparents had always been there for him, sticking by his side throughout his childhood years. But here's the problem. After Charles passed away, Lori straight up ghosted them. Even when they practically begged her for just 1 measly hour of Skype time with their grandson, she gave them the cold shoulder. Word on the street is that Lori was pretty ticked off because Charles had gone and switched his life insurance beneficiary from her to his sister Kay. But isn't it ironic that Lori was so upset considering she and Alex had taken out Kay's brother? Anyway, fast forward to late 2019 and Kay's had enough. She rings up the police in Chandler, Arizona, asking them to check in on JJ and make sure he's doing all right. That's when the cops traced JJ's family all the way to Idaho. By this point, Lori was shacking up with Chad, but her brother Alex and niece Melanie were also crashing in nearby apartments. When the police came knocking that day, Lori tried to pull a fast one, claiming both of her kids were in Arizona.
Are y'all alone, or is that help?
My brother's here.
So JJ would be where?
He's in Arizona.
Who's he with in Arizona?
She's with one of my friends in Arizona.
She also claimed that Tylee was away at college, even though Tylee had never finished high school. Then she complained about Charles's life insurance, even though no one had asked her about that. The same day, Rexburg officers met with Chad. He muttered something about not knowing Lori's phone number. He was incoherent and suspicious. The authorities decided to return to their home with a search warrant. But when they got to the house the next day, Lori and Chad had skedaddled.
There was food in the refrigerator, food in the pantry. Everything had been taken off the hangers, and there was no clothes in the dresser drawer.
Lori's phone went straight to voicemail, and Chad decided to ghost the Idaho police. When the detectives checked the information Lori had given them about her kids, they discovered it was all lies. Tylee had never enrolled in college or school for that matter, ever since their move to Idaho in August 2019. And Melanie, Lori's friend who had reportedly took care of JJ, was only covering for Lori.
She told me that the police had been there asking for JJ, and that she told the police that I had JJ, that I was at a movie called Frozen.
By December 2019, everyone was begging Lori and Chad to come home and reveal where their children were. Even Lori's son from a previous marriage went on TV, begging his mom to be reasonable.
I'm your son. I would never want anything to happen to you, and I would never want anything to happen to Tylee and JJ ever. I know you know the right thing to do is, and I know that you have a good heart, so I know that it's time to do the right thing.
But Lori was far, far away from doing the right thing. Now, she'd married Chad, her 5th husband, and she was living the good life in Hawaii. Yep, that's where journalists tracked them down to around Christmas of that year. And no matter how many uncomfortable questions they showered them with, they ignored them.
Did you do something to your children? Are your children still alive? That's a simple question. I've got 3 kids of my own. I can tell you every minute where my kids are at. Where are your children? And just tell people what's happening. There's people around the country praying for your children, praying for you guys. Why don't you give us answers?
That's great.
That's great. That's great that they're praying for you, praying for your kids. What? You have nothing to say?
These two really weren't good actors. Everyone watching this circus could tell before all the dark facts were even revealed, they were guilty of something truly sinister. Our story begins with Lori Noreen Cox, who was born in sunny San Bernardino, California, to Barry and Janice on June 26, 1973. But here's the thing. Lori wasn't an only child. In fact, she grew up in a pretty big Mormon family. Lori had 3 sisters, Stacy, Laura, and Summer, and 2 brothers, Alex and Ada. Now, back in the day when getting hitched and having kids was the thing to do, especially in large Mormon families, Lori didn't waste any time in starting her own family. At the ripe age of 19, she tied the knot with her high school sweetheart, Nelson. But guess what? Within a year, they were already calling it quits. Fast forward 2 years, and Lori was walking down the aisle once again, this time with her second husband, William. They had a son together, Colby Ryan, born in 1996. But just like clockwork, 2 years later, the couple split up. In 2001, Lori gave marriage another shot with husband number 3, Joseph Ryan. On September 24, 2002, they welcomed their daughter, Tylee Ryan, into the world, Joseph's first kid and Lori's first girl. But surprise, surprise, by 2004, Lori and Joseph were also headed for Splitsville. You'd think 3 divorces by 30 would be enough to make anyone swear off marriage, but not Lori. She would have 2 more husbands before getting thrown into prison for the rest of her life. Also, here's where her creepy relationship with her brother Alex starts out. Apparently, when Lori confided in Alex that Joseph was her, Alex went and got very violent on him, using a taser and threatening to end him. It was Alex who ended up getting arrested and sentenced to 3 months in prison. Reportedly, Alex acted more like a parent around the house than a child. He was the eldest child, and he was often in charge of things while his parents would go on long vacations in Hawaii. It's always Hawaii with this bizarre family. Then, Lori was in high school when she told a friend that Alex wanted to get intimate with her. That's right, her own brother. Whether this happened or not, one can only guess, but by the time Lori got arrested and charged with several counts of murder, Alex was still by her side. Some people believe he did the dirty work for her. In 2004, smack dab between husbands number 3 and 4, Lori decided to take a stab at the Miss Texas beauty pageant. She had already snagged the Mrs. Hayes County crown, and now she was dead set on becoming Miss America. At this point, Lori was juggling life as a hairstylist and a single mom to Tylee, while her son Colby was living with his dad. So Lori makes it to the top 15 semifinalists, right? And when the judge hits her with the "what makes you tick" question, she comes back with, "Being a good mom is very important to me, and a good wife and a good worker. And being all of these things together isn't easy, so basically, I'm a ticking time bomb." Talk about an understatement. Lori was smack in the middle of a nasty divorce, but that was nothing compared to the drama that was about to unfold. Fast forward to late 2005, and Lori crosses paths with Charles Vallow. Being the devout Mormon she was, she wastes no time in tying the knot with him on February 24th, 2006. Now, Charles also came from a big Mormon family, but he wasn't nearly as hardcore about it as Lori. Still, he was all about family values and staying tight-knit with his kids. Charles had 2 boys from a previous marriage, Nicholas and Zachary. So when Lori moved in with him in Arizona, they had a full house with 4 kids. Nick, Zach, Tylee, and Colby, who split his time between Lori's and his dad's place. But remember how Lori's parents used to leave her and her siblings alone while they went on long vacations? Well, Lori pulled the same stunt with her own kids. Charles would often be out of town on business trips, and Lori would take off for days at a time to hang out with her family and friends. This left Charles's sons, Nick and Zach, in charge of looking after Colby and Tylee. And just when you thought things couldn't get any crazier, 2014 rolled around. Lori and Charles decided to adopt Charles's grandnephew, Joshua Jackson, aka JJ. They brought JJ into the family in 2014, but that same year both Charles's sons and Lori's son Colby moved out. So it was just Lori and Charles left to raise Tylee and JJ. But as the pattern yet again repeated, it was more Tylee who raised JJ.
Are you taking a video of my child?
Your child?
My child.
I loved being around JJ and Tylee. Tylee was really protective over JJ, and she was kind of like another mama to him. JJ, say hi.
Sit down. Happy.
Tylee was happy, and so was JJ. But Lori was deeply unhappy, and she was filled with hatred and demented views of life. And when she met her 5th husband, it quickly went downhill. After a 2-year stint in Hawaii trying to make ends meet with a juice bar, the Vallow family moved back to Arizona. Around this time, Lori and Charles's marriage had reached a point of no return. There was no love left in that house. Okay, here's the deal. With each new hubby, Lori was getting more and more into the whole Mormon thing. But by the time she hooked up with Charles, her religious beliefs were starting to veer into cult territory. So when the couple landed back in Arizona, Lori was totally obsessed with this series of books written by none other than Chad Daybell. In Lori's eyes, Chad was like this ultimate truth speaker. A role model she looked up to, but just wait until you hear about all the crazy stuff that he believed. So, in October of 2018, one of Lori's friends who knew all about her new fixation dragged her to this religious shindig where Chad was giving a speech.
Ready to Preparing a People Conference announcement with Chad Daybell, one of our main speakers.
But somehow, Lori totally fell for it and bought into his whole spiel. Now, Chad was born in 1968, just 3 years older than Lori, but a whopping 12 years younger than Charles. He grew up in Utah and married his high school sweetheart, Tammy. They had 5 kids together. Before starting his own book company, Spring Creek Books, Chad worked as a grave digger. And after claiming that God had spoken to him, he packed up and moved to Rexburg, Idaho, apparently just following the big guy's orders. God had also told him that he'd have a big community of Mormons to buy his books there, I guess. But it seems like God also told Chad to start putting on the moves towards a married woman, aka Lori. Of course, all of this was covered up by his bizarre beliefs, which Lori found absolutely fascinating. In Chad's world, everyone fell into 2 categories, light and dark. And you guessed it, if he labeled someone as dark, it meant that they were a Satan worshiper. Chad filled Lori's head with all sorts of wild ideas, telling her that she was this eternal being who had lived 22 lives here on Earth. And just like him, she had spent 5 previous lives on this planet, and get this, in every single one of those lives, they were married. Chad even sent Lori this super detailed email where he had analyzed her entire family, categorizing them as light or dark, and then assigning them levels. By the end of 2016, Lori was a die-hard Chad follower, and she was head over heels for the guy. She started calling dark people zombies and seemed to care less and less about her own family. After all, she was this eternal spirit, destined to lead the 144,000, a group with God's personal protection. Why would someone so special waste their time cleaning the house or looking after the kids? Skip ahead to around New Year's 2020, and Lori was arrested in Hawaii. Chad would be arrested 5 months later. At this point, Charles was dead and 3 people were missing: JJ, Tylee, and Tammy, Chad Daybell's wife. I know, this case gets more outrageous by the minute.
Suddenly, Tammy Daybell, Chad's first wife, passes away in her sleep. Now, this is a 49-year-old woman. She's an avid runner, and according to her friends and family, was in good health, seemed to be in good spirits around the time of her death, which really raised a lot of eyebrows.
And yes, with Lori in custody, the detectives were finally investigating Charles's death as a homicide.
That was the most bull story that I have ever heard in my life. That was a setup, absolute setup murder for hire.
Tammy had died of an apparent heart attack 10 days before Chad eloped with Lori to Hawaii. At her funeral, Chad seemed jolly, and he told people he had visions of his wife dying in her sleep. When the authorities asked him to approve an autopsy, he declined.
He recited many things that were not asked for concerning the details of her death. He told us what happened to her that morning. He told us that she had since been to visit him and is helping him set affairs in order, giving him direction on how to handle certain children and their future. 17
days before Tammy's death, Lori used Charles's credit card to order matching wedding rings for her and Chad. The detectives saw her death as premeditated murder. The detectives would discover that Lori had also become part of his religion/cult over the last year. They would appear together in podcasts discussing how they should prepare for the apocalypse and how they were special people, part of the 144,000.
Gathering together as saints, as brothers and sisters, and preparing for the second coming of Christ.
In March 2020, 6 months after Tylee and JJ's disappearance, the FBI asked people in Idaho to send any pictures they had from the day the kids vanished. They discovered that Alex Cox was there on both days. Was he Lori's mad dog/executioner? There was something else that was even more heartbreaking. Witnesses told detectives that Lori would refer to her children as zombies.
She said that he was being a zombie and climbed up on the cabinets, climbed up on top of the fridge, smashed her picture of Christ down, and then climbed up onto the upper cabinets.
That's called a 7-year-old on the autistic spectrum in need of help, not a zombie. Heartbreakingly, Tylee herself had heard her mom talk on the phone and call her a zombie. Lori was so far gone that she didn't love her children anymore. She just saw them as evil beings who needed to go. While all this horror was being slowly unraveled, authorities were building up a serious arrest warrant for Alex Cox. That's when he took his own life.
I need an ambulance. I have a older male here named Alex. He just passed out here on my bathroom.
On June 9th of 2020, Rexburg authorities turned up at Chad's home with a search warrant. This time, they dug out his garden.
I observed the evidence response recovery team and also cadaver dogs working the entire backyard. So they worked the pond area, and then they had marked off other areas inside the backyard.
The forensic team soon discovered fresh sod on top of rocks on top of some paneling.
As soon as they removed the paneling, I could smell the odor of a decomposing body.
It was JJ's decomposed body buried in Chad's backyard. The same day, Tylee's body was found buried in the pet cemetery behind the house. It had been cut up into small pieces. And before 2020 was over, Tammy's body was exhumed. The coroner noted she had been strangled to death.
We ruled her cause of death to be asphyxia.
What did you determine her manner of death to be?
We determined her manner of death to be homicide. We also didn't find any natural disease that would explain her death. Her heart was completely normal.
Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell, and post-mortem Alex Cox, were charged with the first-degree murders of Charles Vallow, Tammy Daybell, Tylee, and JJ. Lori and Chad might claim they're God-speaking prophets, but they were a match made in hell. They killed their exes and their children to elope in Hawaii and live happily ever after. In May 2023, Lori Vallow Daybell was found guilty of first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit first-degree murder, and grand theft in relation to the deaths of her 2 children, JJ Vallow and Tylee Ryan, as well as conspiracy to commit first-degree murder in connection with the death of Tammy Daybell. The jury reached their verdict after a 6-week trial. In July 2023, Lori was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Chad Daybell's trial began in the spring of 2024, and more shocking details were revealed.
Now, prosecutors allege that Lori and Chad, they were motivated by power, sex, and money, that they were having an affair, that they were cheating on their respective spouses, and they killed those 3 people to benefit financially through insurance and Social Security payouts.
So they weren't just an insane couple viewing their innocent exes as zombies. They knew exactly what they were doing. During Chad's trial, a new video was shown to the jury of Chad speaking to his daughter, Emma.
Sorry, all the neighbors are going to be talking, but you just...
We're okay, Dad.
Well,
We're okay. You raised us that we're independent now.
get that money out of there. Probably just put it in your own personal account.
This was Chad when the authorities raided his property. He knew the gig was up, and he knew what they would find underground. He was not shocked when the bodies were discovered, and he was busier instructing his kids to protect themselves, as he knew he was going away for good. Minutes before getting arrested, he also phoned his new wife, Lori, who was already in prison. They spoke calmly about the authorities raiding their property.
What, are they in the house?
No, they're out from the property.
Are they seizing stuff again?
They're searching.
Why are they not surprised that authorities are digging their garden? Why are they not shocked that human remains were found on Chad's property? To this day, Chad's attorney claims that it was Alex who took Tylee and JJ's lives, and that Chad never knew he'd buried them there. But apart from the attorney, no one really believes that theory. Then, there was this.
That search occurred the last day of Tylee Ryan's sighting,
and we believe she was burned and buried on his property the following day.
In May 2024, it was revealed that Chad had Googled south-southwest wind and other weather conditions one day before Tylee's last sighting. He burned her body. He wanted to know where the wind would take the smell. It's the stuff of nightmares, and yet he claims he had nothing to do with it. It was also during Chad's trial that Tammy's cause of death was revealed for the first time.
We ruled her cause of death to be asphyxia.
What did you determine her manner of death to be?
We determined her manner of death to be homicide.
Chad's single defense strategy? Pointing the finger at now gone Alex Cox. It did not sit well with the jury. On June 1st, 2024, he was sentenced to death. Prosecutor Rob Wood said, Daybell's murders were especially heinous, atrocious, or cruel, manifesting exceptional depravity. This defendant exhibited utter disregard for human life. The defendant, by his conduct, whether such conduct was before, during, or after the commission of the murders at hand, has exhibited a propensity to commit murder, which will probably constitute a continuing threat to society. Chad and Lori left a sickening trail of bodies behind them. It's hard to imagine their extended families ever healing. Charles had children of his own and people who loved him. So did Tammy. And Tylee and JJ never got a chance to live full lives, follow their dreams, find love, and maybe one day have children of their own. Jay Woodcock, JJ and Tylee's grandma, said after Chad's sentencing, I sit here today and try and explain the immense pain that me and everyone in my family continues to endure daily. But how do I do that? I can tell you there have been too many situations in the past few years where we were slammed with the fact that JJ won't hit another milestone. The constant question remains, who would he have become? What kind of man would he have been? There's a hole in my heart, in the hearts of every member of my family that can never be filled and will remain for the rest of my life. It's hard to put into words what these deranged people did, and with Alex gone, the full story might never come to light. We can feel a little reassured, however, that Chad and Lori will never step out of prison again. What's left of their distraught families is safe. Thanks for watching, you guys. What are your thoughts on this case? Do you know other dangerous doomsday cult leaders? Let me know in a comment. And before you go, why not like and subscribe? See you soon. Keep safe.